Hey there, and welcome to Family Revenge. We're so glad you're here. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you can stay with us for every twist and turn. Let's jump right in. It was a quiet morning, the kind where the sunlight felt like it was sneaking through the blinds to avoid disturbing the peace. The smell of toast and coffee hung in the air, mixing with the soft hum of the refrigerator. I didn't expect the day to change everything, but it did. Mom sat across from me at the kitchen table, her hands wrapped around her coffee cup like it was something fragile. She looked calm, unnervingly calm, like she was about to deliver bad news but didn't want to cause a scene. Danielle, she said, her voice a little too even. Your surgery. The insurance denied it. They won't cover it. I stared at her, waiting for the punchline. Maybe she was joking, maybe it was a mistake, but no. I could see it in her eyes. She wasn't kidding. What are we going to do? I asked, my throat tightening. Mom set down her cup and gave a little shrug, almost like she didn't have to explain. If it's meant to be, it will be. She said it like some kind of religious mantra, the kind I heard from church, but never actually believed. Dad, who had been standing in the kitchen doorway, didn't say a word. He was always the silent one, the one who just let Mom handle everything. He shifted his weight from one foot to the other, his hands in his pockets, not even looking at me. Finally, he spoke, his voice as empty as it always was when he was asked to make a decision. We can't sink our savings into uncertainty. I felt the weight of those words, felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. A business, their precious restaurant, was more important than my life. I got up from the table slowly, like my legs were made of lead, and walked to my room without a word. I didn't know what to say anyway. I just closed the door behind me, and the silence in that room was louder than anything I'd heard in my entire life. They had chosen a business over me, and for the first time, I wondered if I'd ever mattered at all. I sat in my room, the door shut, the dim light from my phone casting shadows on the walls. The quiet was thick, like it was waiting for something to break it. I couldn't sleep, not with the mess in my head, not with the sudden, crushing feeling that my parents had made their choice, and it wasn't me. I opened the browser, typing in things I'd never thought I'd Google. Free medical care for minors, juvenile jail medical services, and how to emancipate yourself. I clicked through links, reading the fine print, searching for any sliver of hope. Juvenile jail actually provided care. It was a relief of sorts to know I could get treated, but the thought of going to prison for that, of doing something stupid just to get help, made my stomach twist. What was I willing to do to survive? I looked up shelters next. There had to be something, right? Somewhere close by where I could escape, get away from everything. But the closest shelter was over 30 miles away. That was farther than I could walk, especially with no money, no plan. I could hitchhike maybe, but I'd heard the horror stories. I didn't know what was worse, staying or leaving. Then, out of nowhere, I thought of Aunt Carla. Carla had always been on the outside of things. She was my mom's younger sister, always a bit sad, a bit off, the one they mocked for being broke and wasting her life on stray animals. They were always telling me how she wasn't doing anything with herself, how she was never going to get anywhere. But Carla always made me feel seen, like I wasn't invisible to her. She'd never said much, but she had this quiet way of listening, of being there when everyone else wasn't. She was a waitress, lived in a tiny apartment by herself. I hadn't seen her in months, but I remembered her kindness. Maybe, just maybe, I could go there. I pulled myself together and packed my essentials, my phone, a charger, a change of clothes, my savings, $65. I couldn't even buy a decent meal with that, but it was all I had. I waited until the house was still, after midnight, the kind of dead silence where the world feels like it's holding its breath. I slipped out the door, careful not to make a sound, and stepped into the night. The streets were empty, the night cool against my skin. I walked without a real direction, just heading toward the gas station a few blocks away. The neon lights flickered overhead like a beacon. I sat down on the bench outside, surrounded by the smell of cheap coffee and gasoline. No one paid attention to me, not even the night shift clerk, who half-heartedly waved when I came in for a drink. I wasn't even sure what I was doing there. It wasn't safe, it wasn't smart. But I felt invisible, and for the first time in hours, I didn't care. No one knew where I was. I sat there all night, the cold air biting at my skin, feeling like a ghost in the world. People came and went, heads down, wrapped in their own little universes. I was just another nameless face in the crowd. And yet, something inside me, a spark I didn't even know was there, kept me going. I was here and no one noticed me, but I wasn't going back. Not to them, not to a life where I wasn't even worth a simple surgery. I leaned back against the bench, listening to the hum of the streetlights and the occasional car rushing by. I was more alone than I'd ever been, but somehow, I didn't feel helpless. The next morning, I pulled my phone from my pocket, hands shaking just a little. I dialed Carla's number, feeling stupid for not calling earlier. It rang once, twice. Then she picked up, her voice rough with sleep but still steady. "Stay put," she said. No questions, no hesitation. I didn't ask how she knew where I was or why she'd even want to help me. I just nodded into the phone, even though she couldn't see me. "Okay," I whispered. 20 minutes later, a beat-up sedan rolled into the gas station parking lot. The engine sputtered as it came to a stop, and the door creaked open. Carla climbed out, her jeans faded from years of use, her hair pulled into a messy ponytail. She didn't say anything at first, just walked over to me and pulled me into a hug. I didn't know what to expect from her. Maybe a lecture, maybe a few questions. But there was nothing like that. Just warmth, just her arms around me, holding me tight. She didn't ask about the night or why I was there. She didn't need to. She took my hand and, without a word, led me to her car. Her apartment wasn't much. A tiny second-floor walk-up tucked behind a row of older buildings. The walls were peeling, and the carpet looked like it hadn't seen a vacuum in years. But when I stepped inside, I smelled vanilla candles and fried onions. It smelled like her, and somehow that felt like enough. She didn't make me feel guilty or weird. She just handed me a spare toothbrush and set me up in the small bedroom. It was simple, but it was quiet. It was safe. I lay down, finally allowing myself to feel the exhaustion that had been building for days, maybe weeks. The next morning, I woke up to the smell of eggs and something sizzling in the kitchen. Carla was already at the stove, her back to me as she cracked an egg into the pan. I rubbed my eyes, still trying to shake the fog of sleep, and sat up. She didn't ask how I'd slept, didn't make small talk. She just slid a plate of scrambled eggs in front of me and poured coffee into a chipped mug. Only then, when I was settled at the small table, did she finally ask, "What happened?" I could feel the weight of the question before I even said a word. But it came out in pieces, like I had to say it aloud to understand it myself. "Mom and Dad, they won't pay for my surgery. They're saving money for the restaurant. They're more focused on that. They told me I should be grateful for the life they've given me." I swallowed, my throat suddenly tight. "I'm not even worth the surgery." Not when it comes down to money, Carla didn't interrupt. She just listened, nodding here and there, her eyes steady on me. Her face didn't change, but I could see the way she held herself, like she was trying to absorb everything I was saying, like she needed to carry it for me. When I finished, Carla set her fork down. Her hands were still, but there was something in her eyes, something fierce, like she was already a step ahead, already making decisions for both of us. "You're not going back," she said, like it was a fact. No negotiation, no room for debate, just simple, undeniable truth. I didn't argue, didn't ask her how she would make it happen or what it would cost. I just sat there, letting her words settle into me. Maybe I didn't know what I was doing, but she did. She had a plan, and for the first time in a long time, I wasn't alone in this. The next few days felt like a blur of phone calls, paperwork, and the quiet hum of Carla's determination. She didn't waste any time. As soon as she decided I wasn't going back to my parents, she went to work. She called clinics, doctors, even hospitals. Every number she dialed felt like a new door opening, but it was always the same answer. "We can't treat you without payment up front, and for minors, we need consent from a guardian." The quotes were insane. Thousands, tens of thousands of dollars. She didn't flinch when she heard the numbers. She just scribbled them down in her notebook, her hand moving fast like she was plotting a map to somewhere better. I couldn't help but watch her, wondering how she could be so calm when everything was so out of control. That afternoon, Carla pulled open a drawer in the kitchen and started going through old folders, bank statements, insurance papers, even what looked like a stock portfolio. She rifled through them like she was looking for something, like the solution was buried somewhere in those dusty old papers. "I've got bonds, a couple savings accounts from when I worked at the diner," she said, pulling out a few documents. "Not much, but I'll make it work." I stood in the doorway, my arms crossed, still trying to process it all. I was trying to stay out of her way, trying not to make her feel like she was doing more than she should, but I couldn't help myself. "Carla, I could get a job. Or I could leave. You don't have to—" She looked up at me, her face serious, her voice firm. "You just focus on getting better." That's all she didn't need to explain. She was already in this. And I realized, in that moment, She wasn't going to let me ruin it by feeling guilty. I was quiet after that, trying to find a way to help, trying to figure out my place in all of this. But as the days went on, I saw it more and more clearly. This was about survival. Carla wasn't just trying to help me, she was fighting for both of us. And it wasn't about speeches or grand promises, it was about action. By the end of the week, Carla took her apartment's rent papers from the counter and set them on the table. She'd made her decision. "I'm putting the place up for sale," she said, her tone even. "I'm not letting you get lost in the system." I blinked, trying to process what she'd said. It felt like a slap, like a wake-up call. She was selling everything she had for me, and I wasn't even sure what to say, how to thank her. "Carla!" I started, but she cut me off with a shake of her head. "No need for any of that," she said, the corner of her mouth lifting slightly. "Just stay alive, kid." "That's all I need." I sat down at the table, trying not to feel overwhelmed. She wasn't waiting for me to solve anything, to figure anything out. She was just making it happen. Her life was getting smaller, and mine was getting bigger. I wasn't sure how or when it had shifted, but I felt it in the pit of my stomach. I wasn't going to lose her, and I wasn't going to lose myself either. Carla wasn't asking for a thank you or an apology or anything. She was just doing what needed to be done. And I was just along for the ride, except it didn't feel like a ride anymore. It felt like a fight I was finally ready to join. The treatment started a week later. It was harder than I thought it would be. The medicine made my body feel like it was on fire one minute and freezing cold the next. I'd get dizzy, nauseous. Every day felt like I was dragging myself through mud, my body pushing back against the healing, fighting to stay broken. Carla never once made me feel like I was burdening her, though. She just kept going. She made breakfast every morning, scrambled eggs with a side of toast, sometimes bacon if she had it, and didn't ask questions. She cleaned the apartment without complaining, kept the clutter from piling up. She listened when I needed to talk and knew when to leave me alone. She didn't push me, never tried to cheer me up or tell me everything would be okay. She just let me be. It was like she knew the hardest thing for me wasn't the sickness, it was the silence. The silence of not having anyone else to turn to, not having anyone who actually cared enough to be here. The silence of my parents' choice. As the days passed, my mind started to clear, even as my body felt like it was falling apart. I thought about my parents, about what they'd done. I thought about how, when I was younger, I would sit at the table while they talked about opening a second restaurant, about all the plans they had, how they promised Curtis he could run it when he graduated. And then I thought about that night, the night they told me they were putting all their money into that dream, even if it meant I couldn't get the surgery. It hit me harder than anything else had. They just let me go. No hesitation, no fight. They'd picked their restaurant over me. And in that moment, I realized it wasn't just about the surgery, it was about everything. They had chosen everything else over me for years. I thought about how they worshipped Mr. Hollis, the big shot restaurant investor. They'd spent years trying to get him on board, make him their partner. He'd even visited once, walking through their restaurant like he owned the place. I was told to stay invisible when he came by, not to make a scene, not to be a distraction. Now, as I lay on the couch, weak and tired, the anger I'd been ignoring bubbled up inside of me. I couldn't let it stay buried anymore. Mr. Hollis had seen me, just once, but he hadn't really seen me. I realized I had a chance to make him see me, not as their daughter, but as someone who deserved a voice, deserved a place in the world, whether he knew it or not. I pulled my laptop out of my bag and started typing. It wasn't a crazy idea, just a plan. I didn't know if it would work, but I had to try. I typed up an email to Mr. Hollis, explaining who I was, what had happened, and what my parents had done. I included the screenshots of the medical denial, the texts where they talked about the restaurant instead of my health. I attached the quote from the treatment center that they refused to pay for. I ended the email with a single line. "I thought you should know who you're considering investing in." I read it over, then read it again, feeling the weight of every word. I didn't tell Carla. I didn't want to tell anyone. This was mine, my choice. I hit send without looking back. Carla walked in a few minutes later, and I pushed the laptop aside, trying to act casual. She didn't ask what I'd done, but she saw the tension in my shoulders. She could tell something was happening, but she didn't push. Instead, she just nodded. "You're doing something," she said quietly. I didn't know what I was doing exactly, but for the first time, I knew it was something I had to do. I couldn't just sit back anymore. I wasn't just going to survive. I was going to make sure they knew I was here, that I mattered. Carla gave me a small smile. Whatever happens, she said, we'll figure it out. And for once, I believed her. The email sat in my drafts for hours. I couldn't stop staring at the screen, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. What was I doing? Was this even the right thing? But every time I thought about deleting it, I just felt more angry. Angry at them. Angry at myself for letting them get away with it for so long. So I started typing again. I had to be calm, logical, facts, nothing more. I began with a simple introduction, my name, who I was. I explained my parents' decision to save their money for the second restaurant instead of covering my surgery, attaching screenshots of the insurance denial, and the texts where they talked about everything except me. I added the treatment center quote, the one they refused to pay. I didn't make it dramatic. I didn't try to twist the story. I just laid it out. Their priorities, their choices, and the impact those choices had on my life. I thought about Carla, what she'd done for me. She didn't even hesitate to throw everything away to help me. No questions asked. I added a note about that too, about how she was selling everything she had to make sure I had a chance to live. I didn't go into details about how it made me feel or how much it had cost her. I just said the truth. Carla is doing what my parents won't. I sat back in the chair, staring at the screen. My pulse pounded in my ears. I felt like I was about to send a grenade into their lives, into everything they thought they had under control. But I wasn't thinking about them anymore. I was thinking about myself. The email ended simply. I thought you should know who you're considering investing in. Just one line. No begging, no guilt trips. Just cold, hard truth. I read the email over one last time. My chest was tight, my heart racing, but I didn't hesitate. I clicked send. As the email disappeared into the ether, I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. I wasn't waiting for anything anymore. I wasn't hoping for anything. I just needed them to see me. Finally, to see me. I stood up from the chair, closed the laptop, and walked away. I didn't look back. I couldn't. The words were out there, the truth laid bare. What happened next was no longer in my hands, and that felt better than I ever expected. It was weeks later when I first noticed. I was on my phone, idly scrolling through my social media feed, when something caught my eye. The investor badge that had always been proudly displayed on my parents' restaurant's website was gone. Just gone. It wasn't replaced by anything, not a new logo or a new name. It was just a hole where that badge used to be. My heart skipped, like I was waiting for something to drop, some truth to fall into place. I checked the website again, refreshed it. Same thing. I didn't even have to search for long before I found the reason. They'd been quietly dropped by the firm, no announcement, no press release, just a quiet, humiliating pullout. The next few days felt like a slow unraveling. At first, it was just the small things. Negative reviews started to pop up online, suddenly and in waves. At first, it was one or two complaints, but then there were more, and they started getting personal. Overpriced, terrible service, unqualified staff, too many empty tables. Every review felt like a slap in the face, like someone else had finally seen what I'd known for years. It was like everyone was starting to catch up to the truth. Then I started hearing whispers. On online forums, in local news stories. There were rumors about shady practices, mismanagement, about my parents' desperation to keep the restaurant afloat. I didn't want to know more, but I couldn't help myself. I searched for everything I could find, checking public records, digging through whatever I could get my hands on. What I found only confirmed what I'd feared. The place was bleeding money, and no one wanted to be a part of it anymore. One by one, the restaurants, schools, vendors, and regular clients started pulling out. They didn't even try to hide it. The contracts were gone, the supplies stopped coming. Even the staff was walking out, tired of working for a place that no longer held any value. It wasn't long before the rebranding started. They came up with a new name, a new logo, a new website. They tried to polish the mess they'd made, as if changing the name would make everything better. But it didn't work. It didn't change anything. And slowly, the whole thing, everything they'd built, began to fall apart. The restaurant closed. Then, the house. It all happened so fast, like a collapsing house of cards. One day, they were the proud owners of a restaurant that once stood at the center of their world, and the next, they were left with nothing. I heard them arguing in the living room one night, their voices muffled through the door. But I didn't move. I didn't care. I wasn't going to get sucked back into their mess. Not this time. They had made their choices, and now they were living with the consequences. I watched from a distance, but I didn't say anything, not a word. I had learned that silence was the only way forward. It wasn't my fight anymore. I had my own to deal with now. In the weeks that followed, I kept my head down. I focused on my own life, on the tutoring business I'd started with Carla's help. It was small at first, just a few kids, a handful of hours a week. But it grew, and the more it grew, the more it felt like I was building something real. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was becoming something bigger. They didn't know any of this. They didn't know that I was finally living the life I'd always wanted. And in some strange way, that was enough for me. I didn't need their approval. I didn't need their validation. I had built something on my own, and that felt better than anything they had ever given me. So I watched their collapse from the outside, quiet and still while I kept building. And for the first time in my life, I felt like I was finally in control. The business started small, just a few local kids who needed help with SATs and college applications. I wasn't sure where it would go, but I poured everything into it. Long nights, endless emails, meetings with parents who had no idea how to navigate the college system. Slowly, the word spread. Parents started referring their friends. Then it became more than just test prep. It was guidance, scholarships, application strategies. I realized there was a bigger need, working class kids who didn't have the resources but were just as determined as anyone else. I hired Ruth to handle the administration. She was organized, reliable, and made sure nothing fell through the cracks. I paid her well, not just because she deserved it, but because she helped make this all possible. Ruth believed in the business as much as I did, and it wasn't just about the paycheck for her. It was about giving kids a shot, kids who hadn't been given much else. By the time Carla's birthday rolled around, the business had grown enough that I felt like I could breathe. But even with all the hustle, there was still a part of me that felt like I owed Carla something more than just gratitude. She had given up everything for me, her apartment, her savings, her time. She didn't ask for any of it. So I wanted to do something that felt as big as what she'd done for me. I waited until her birthday. I hadn't told her what I was planning. We sat at her tiny kitchen table, surrounded by the same clutter we'd always had, just talking like we usually did. I had her open the envelope. She pulled out the deed to a house. A modest one, nothing fancy, but it was hers. Her hand shook as she read the paper. She looked at me, then back at the deed, like she was trying to figure out if it was real. Danielle? Her voice cracked, and I saw her face go from confused to overwhelmed, her eyes starting to water. I don't know what to say. Don't say anything, I whispered, my throat tight. Just take it. You deserve this. Carla burst into tears. I did too. Neither of us said anything for a long time, just holding on to each other. The silence felt full in a way I hadn't expected. It was the kind of moment that made everything else fall away. The bad memories, the mistakes, the years spent wondering if anything would ever be okay. Later that week, I surprised her again. I bought her a plane ticket to Italy, something I knew she'd always wanted but never thought she could afford. She'd been a waitress her whole life. She never had the luxury of a vacation. I made sure she had everything she needed: the best flights, a nice hotel, a guide to show her around Florence. I wanted her to have everything for once. No strings attached. When she posted the photo from Florence, her standing by the Arno River, the sun setting behind her, it felt like something shifted in both of us. Her caption read, "To my incredible niece Danielle, thank you for the life I never thought I could have." That post went viral. It wasn't some big deal to her. It was just a snapshot of a dream come true. But it caught fire, and before long, it was everywhere. Shared by friends, strangers, news outlets. It was her story, yes, but it was mine too. And that's when they saw it. My parents. The photo spread, and when they finally saw it, I didn't know what they thought, but I didn't care. I had given Carla the life she deserved, and even though they hadn't been part of it, I knew they saw the difference. They had made their choices, and I'd made mine. I didn't wait for them to come back, to ask for forgiveness or for anything. I was building something of my own, something real, and I wasn't going to let their failures define me. I had given Carla a future. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had one too. I was standing outside the college workshop when I saw them. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light. Somehow I imagined them being far away from me, still on their own path, far from the mess they'd left behind. But then I saw my mom's red hair, the way it caught the sunlight. I froze. My heart skipped. They were standing at the edge of the parking lot, just outside the doors, looking like they had no place to be but there. They hadn't even called ahead, hadn't tried to reach out. My dad was standing with his hands shoved in his pockets, shoulders hunched like the weight of everything was finally getting to him. My mom, though, her face was pale, almost gaunt. She was smiling, too wide, like she was trying to convince herself she hadn't lost everything. I didn't move at first. I didn't want to. But then my mom stepped forward, her eyes locking on mine. She took a breath, like she was bracing herself. Danielle, she said, her voice a little cracked. We're so proud of you. You've done, you've done so much. We made a mistake. She didn't look like she meant it. Not really. It was like she was reading from a script she didn't understand. My dad mumbled something behind her. We didn't, we didn't know I swallowed hard. There was nothing I could say to make it feel real. I didn't trust them to feel what I felt, didn't trust their sudden remorse. I stayed quiet, just watching them, like they were strangers. They were the same people who had let me go. The same people who, a year ago, chose a restaurant over my life. Then my mom stepped closer, like she was trying to hold on to something she didn't even understand. Can you help us? Just a little? Things have, things have gotten bad. We're struggling. She looked away for a second, like she didn't want to say it, but she did. We need a loan, a small one, just to keep the place going until we can turn it around. I couldn't breathe. The nerve of it, the audacity. They'd spent months making me feel like my life wasn't even worth a loan, and now here they were, asking for one, like everything could go back to how it was. My chest tightened. You told me my life wasn't worth a loan, I said, my voice cold, clearer than I'd ever expected it to be. I'm telling you the same thing. It was the only truth I could give them, and I didn't have anything else to say. Not then, not now. I turned, not waiting for them to say another word. I didn't care if they called me, if they begged, if they tried to explain it all away. I wasn't going back. I wasn't ever going to be the thing they left behind again. I didn't look back when I walked into the building. I didn't need to. What they had built, what they had destroyed, it wasn't my problem anymore. And in a way, that was the most freeing thing I'd ever felt. When I got home that night, the weight of the day hadn't quite left me. I walked through the door, still feeling that raw edge, that tightness in my chest. But the moment I stepped into the kitchen, I saw Carla sitting at the table, waiting for me. She didn't ask about the confrontation. She just knew. How did it go? She asked, her voice soft, like she was offering me space if I needed it. I didn't look at her. Fine, I said. The word felt hollow, like it wasn't enough to describe everything that had happened, but it was the only answer I had. I didn't want to talk about it, not yet. Carla didn't push. She just nodded and poured 2 mugs of tea, the steam curling up in delicate wisps. She slid one in front of me without saying a word, and I wrapped my hands around it, letting the heat settle into my palms. We sat there for a while, just sipping in silence. It wasn't uncomfortable. It was comfortable in a way I'd never experienced before. Eventually, I couldn't help myself. I glanced at her, my voice quiet. Where do you want to go next? Carla raised an eyebrow, a smile tugging at her lips. Somewhere warm. With a hammock, she said, her eyes twinkling with a quiet hope that she had never allowed herself to voice out loud. I smiled, more to myself than her, imagining it. A beach, a hammock, nothing to worry about except the sound of the waves. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just dreaming of escape, I was planning it. And for the first time, I was giving someone else what they deserved too. We touched mugs, a silent agreement passing between us. As I sat back in my chair, watching the light from the kitchen glow softly, I realized something. I didn't just survive. I didn't just scrape by and hope for the best. I had built something for both of us. I'd given Carla a future, and in doing that, I'd found my own. This wasn't just about getting by. This was about living. I hadn't just made a life. I'd made a life worth living.